What is up, guys? Top tier Yu-Gi-Oh here. Hope you guys are doing well, and today we have an updated Burning Abyss Orcust deck profile for you guys. And let me tell you, this build is insane. It is infinitely better than the last build, and I think it's one of the best decks of the format. And obviously a lot of people aren't going to play it, so it's not going to represent very highly, but I think it's one of the better versions of Orcust. I mean, it's very similar to the Lunalight Orcust build, to where the ceiling's just very high, to that you're able to summon monsters like Appaloosa, just like they can summon as a thought, to be able to shut off all of hand traps. So you can play around Nibiru, you can play around Super Poly, you can play around a lot of things this format and still end on very powerful boards. And so I think this is one of the best builds of both Orcust and Burning Abyss. A lot of potential. So let's go ahead and get into the profile. Well, you know what, actually before that, I'm not just going to talk about it, I'm going to show you. So let's go ahead and do a couple of test hands before getting into the deck profile. Just really quickly, just a couple. So just going to shuffle the deck up a little bit. And let's see what we get. Alright, we drew Cobra, Harp, and Cynbal Skeleton. So this isn't the best hand, so not the best representation of this deck's consistency, but the deck is incredibly consistent. Don't let this hand fool you. Every deck, breaks from time to time, so we're just gonna do another one. This deck was also organized in Monster Spell and Trap, so it's kind of weird right now shuffling and drawing cards, but we're gonna draw well enough, I think. Okay, so this hand is actually insane. This is very insane. This is full combo. This is the spicy card of the hand, obviously, but this hand is really good. So we can even just play this out really quickly, just the way this will work. So we have 3 special summons right here. We have Harp as a normal summon, a 4th special summon. We can rip a card from the opponent's hand, or we can save this until next turn for a follow-up to pop our opponent's board, put up more damage. This is an insane card, actually, that I'll talk more about later. But what we would do is special summon 2 of them, go into Cherubini. Cherubini's effect will dump Graff to summon Seer. So you send Graff to the graveyard. Where's the Seer? There is the Seer. Now we can special summon the other Burning Abyss. This is the 5th summon. If our opponent wants to Nibiru us here, that's fine. We'll still get Seer's effect. And then we'll get back to Cherubini. We haven't even normal summoned yet. So we would have Cherubini, Nibiru token, and we would still have 2 more summons. So we're having full Orcust combo, and then still maybe take a card out of their hand, or again hold this till next turn. So Nibiru is absolutely fine right here. But if they don't have it, or they don't have any interruptions, we go into Dante, if I can find it. You guys are getting to see the whole deck right here. Next, what we do is normal summon the Harp Horror, go into Appaloosa. And again, there's no reason to Nibiru on that board either, because we get a card back to the hand, we get back the Cherubini, we still have Harp Horror, we still have an extender in hand, so that's all fine. You go into Appaloosa, Seer revive Dante, add back Seer, that's going to make a Beatrice. So now we have Harp engrave, and we have an extender, so we could summon this, take a card out the opponent's hand, Harp get symbols, and then do all the Orcust stuff. I'm not going to take up all your time playing this hand out, but you guys can see from here, this hand is absurd. And that's just one example of what this deck can do. Let's do one more test hand. Just one more, really quick. The first hand was an aberration. This deck does not break very often because the Burning Abyss engine makes it really, really consistent. The Cobra is the one brick in the deck, the one card that's almost always a brick. So let's see what we do with this. Yeah, so this is another really, really good hand. Now, one downside though is that we do have 2 normal summons. We have the Rhino Warrior and we have the Harp, but that's really fine. There are ways to play around that. For example, this is going to get us the Cherubini. We can make a barricade blocker to discard this if we wanted to. We have Nessie as an extender. We have Instant Fusion as an extender. We can either extend with this or kind of slow our plays down and end on Winda. So it kind of depends on what we want to do. We also have the potential of Nessie hitting Harp Horror. And so this hand is still really, really good. Even without Nessie hitting Harp, this is a good hand. So again, the deck is super consistent, very, very powerful. But let's go ahead and get into the profile. I will make another combo video though in the future. If you want to see kind of the basic combos, that will be in the top right corner of the screen, but a more in-depth combo video is coming very, very soon, and when that happens, I'll be sure to let you guys know. So subscribe to the channel and click the bell button so that you are updated and notified when I do upload the combo video. So let's go ahead and get into the profile finally. Alright, so getting into the profile, this is a Burning Abyss deck, so we are going to start with the Burning Abyss monsters. And so for those, we have 3 Scarm, 2 Libic, 1 Seer, 1 Graff, 3 Farfa, 2 Barbar, 1 Rubic, 1 Cagna, 1 Calcab, and 1 Alich. So we want to max out on the Burning Abyss monsters for the most part. The only one that we're missing is Drahig, and that's something that I do want to play, but I just don't have one at the moment. If I did have one, I would probably cut a Farfa for it. The reason for that is because we really don't want 3-ofs of any of the Burning Abyss monsters. The only reason we have 3 Farfa and 3 Scarm is because those are the ones that we want to resolve the most throughout the game. Like Farfa is the most common form of disruption. Scarm we want to resolve every single turn for follow-up plays. So these are both important all of the time, but we also want to reduce the redundancy. And so I think maybe cutting a Farfa for a Drahig would be the way to go. Because I do open multiple Farfa sometimes. It's not very fun. It essentially turns one of them into a normal summon, which you don't want. The good thing about these Burning Abyss monsters is that this is 16 extenders that are not normal summons. So opening multiples gives you one, which you don't want. And so definitely considering maybe cutting a Farfa for a Drahig. The only reason Barbar is at 2 is because, again, I wanted more Burning Abyss monsters, and so these ones I definitely didn't want to play more of. Like, I didn't want to play another Alich, a Calcab, a Cagna, or a Rubic. Like, I don't want to play more of these, but Barbar is something that, more than any other Burning Abyss monster outside of these top row, like outside of the engine Burning Abyss monsters, Barbar is maybe the one that has directly won me the most games that any other Burning Abyss card couldn't do. Even including Farfa. Like, sometimes Alich is just as good as a Farfa, but Barbar is something that wins you a lot of games, trust me. And it gives you a chance to get lucky. Like, you go into a game 3, you make a Dante, you mill 3, maybe you hit it. So that's it for the Burning Abyss monsters. Let's move into the rest of the deck. So moving on to these pseudo Burning Abyss monsters, these don't have Burning Abyss in their name, but they definitely help the engine out a lot. We have 1 Tour Guide and 1 Fiendish Rhino Warrior, and Rhino Warrior is a card that I definitely want to talk about. It's something that I've struggled to figure out what the optimal number is, because it's good. In a vacuum, Rhino Warrior is very good. It protects your Burning Abyss monster from blowing themselves up. It sends them to the graveyard. But I found that in real matchups, what it oftentimes does is a bit underwhelming, because you have Cherubini to send cards from the deck to the graveyard. You really don't need a second one unless your opponent is stopping the first. But hand traps aren't super popular right now, at least not the ones that are going to stop you. Like, the main hand trap that you're worried about is Nibiru, but that's not stopping. Like, that has nothing to do with Rhino Warrior. If you think about maybe the most common hand trap, like Ash Blossom, like, sure, like if they Ash your Cherubini, you have Rhino Warrior as backup, or if they Ash the Rhino Warrior, you have Cherubini. But what your opponent should be ashing is your Graff. And having multiple sends to the graveyard doesn't protect that. It doesn't give you a follow play. Like, if they negate your Graff, you only have one of them, and that's like it for the turn, at least in terms of like using Graff and stuff. But it's not it. Like, you still have other plays. And so I found that Rhino Warrior in that scenario, which is the one where it matters, isn't that impactful. The only other time where I really like it is if I'm discarding it off of something and it can send a Libic and summon a BA monster. But even then, like, I up Libic up to 2, and so I don't need Graff, or I don't need Rhino Warrior to do that. And so I've cut it down to 1. I'm even maybe considering cutting it overall, because yes, it's good, but it's not amazing. And the fact that it's a normal summon is a huge turnoff in this deck. So let's go ahead and move into the rest of the deck. We have 3 Predaplant, whatever it's called, Scorpios. This card is insane in this deck, mostly because by itself, it is a 1-card Orcust combo. Like, by itself. This and a discard, of course, but like just this card. You would summon Cobra, and then you would go into Cherubini, dump Graff, summon Seer. So you'd have Cherubini, Seer, and then you use the instant fusion to get like a Winda or something, and then you can link those 3 into a Curious, and then do your full Orcust combo. So this is a 1-card Orcust combo. It is absolutely insane. It forces the hand traps if your opponent has them, because it's just so good without them. And then even if they do have a hand trap, then you're able to play around that with cards like the Dangers. Again, Rhino Warrior helps, Libic helps, because if you discard a Libic for Scorpio's effect, let's say they Ash Blossom or Impermanence it. Okay, that's fine. Libic will summon a Burning Abyss monster. You still go into Cherubini, you still make the rest of your play. And so Scorpio is really, really good. And I mean, it just adds a whole other level of power to the deck. For the extenders, we have 6 Danger monsters. We have 2 Jackalope, 2 Tsuchinoko, and 2 Nessie. Obviously the maximum numbers of these that you can play. These are the only Dangers that I play because they're the only ones that really work with this deck. These 4 are level 3, so that's really synergistic. Nessie is not level 3, but it surges the other ones, and so that's fine. They're also different types, which help you make curious, which again is one of the main ways that you are sending your Orcust cards to the graveyard if you don't draw them. And so all of these help in many different ways. I mean, they help you make Cherubi, they're different types, they're dark, so they help you make curious. They draw you into your engine if you get kind of lucky. And so they really serve multiple purposes, and that is amazing. That's what you want in this deck. You want cards that serve multiple purposes. Like, yes, they can be extenders, but they're extenders in different ways. And that's kind of what I mean there. There's a bit of extending utility, if so to speak. But the main I shouldn't say the main extender, but my favorite extender, the one that is probably going to be the most surprising card in this entire deck, the one that I've enjoyed playing the most, is 2 Chaos Dragon Levianeers. This card is insane. And so going first is an extender because it's very easy to get 3 darks in your graveyard. This whole deck is dark. And so that means that you're going to be able to summon this pretty much for free going first. It's going to rip a card out of your opponent's hand. It is a dragon dark, so again, it's a different type from every other card in the deck, so it's going to help you make curious. And if you're going second, you're very likely going to be able to get a light in the graveyard as well, which means you're going to be able to destroy cards on your opponent's side of the field. And so it's really good going first, it's really good going second. It's got 3000 attack, you can attack over stuff. This card, again, serves multiple roles. It can be an extender, it can be a breaker. You can get 3 lights in the graveyard, and then you can revive stuff. So I mean, it can be an extender in that regard as well. So Chaos Dragon Levianeer is an insanely good card. So I really like that addition to this deck. Easy to summon and adds to what you're trying to do. For the Orcust engine, we have 3 Harp Horrors, 1 Cynbal Skeletons, and 1 Brass Bombard. This is something that I've also really struggled with, and I'd like your guys' opinion on as well, what you think the optimal Orcust engine would be. I mean, I'm thinking about maybe cutting a Harp Horror just because one of them is rare. Just kidding, but so to kind of explain why I chose this ratio, really what you need just to do your full Orcust combo are just these 2, right? This is what you need. Just need 1 Harp, 1 Cymbals. But the problem with this, in my opinion, is that if you draw either one of them, it doesn't work. And now because every single hand in this deck, more or less, I shouldn't say every hand, but let's say 90% of hands in this deck allow you to do an Orcust combo, whether you draw these or not. 90% of your hands, because your whole deck is monsters pretty much. All you gotta do is put 3 on board, you make curious, you have an Orcust combo. It's very easy. So if you draw any one of them, you're not doing that. And so that's 24% of your hands, you're not doing an Orcust combo. That's not very good, so we needed to fix that problem. Harp helps because, if you draw Harp, you still can do it, but Cymbals especially. Like if you draw Cymbals, like you're not doing the Orcust combo if you're just playing these 2. Brass Bombard is what I added to fix that problem, because now if you draw Cynbal Skeletons, okay, your Harp can now summon Brass Bombard. Bombard can summon the Skeletons, and then you play as normal. That's fine. Or if you draw into Harp, you can dump Brass with Curious, special summon the Harp, then do your Orcust combo as normal. So it works the same way. It just kind of makes it so that drawing them isn't as terrible. However, I realized later, like the more I played this deck, the more I tested, the more I realized that even just drawing Harp works. Like 2 Burning Abyss monsters in Harp is Appaloosa plus an Orcust play. And that's something that most decks can't deal with. And so at that point I realized I should just add in more Harp Horrors. And so that's where I ended up playing 3. And so I am maybe considering dropping the Bombard at this point, because you don't always need to go the full combo where you're doing everything with Cynbal Skeletons and whatnot. But it's interesting because it makes your deck that much better. It does add a level of power to it, and it isn't that much of a brick either, because this is, again, it's a dark that's not a fiend monster, not a fairy type. And so even if you hard draw this and nothing else, you can make Curious, dump Harp Horror, and then continue doing your Orcust combo. And so it's not like this is like a terrible brick either. And so it's interesting, like maybe this could be something better, but it's not bad, and it does solve a certain problem. Plus drawing just Brass Bombard and Harp Horror is really good. Like that helps you combo out too. And so this is it's interesting. I definitely like having a lot of Harps though. I'm not sure about the Brass Bombard. So let me know what you guys think about that. And then finally for the monsters, these are the engine requirements of the deck. Or I would say that Brass Bombard is also an engine requirement. But these are the engine requirements for the deck. We have 1 Cobra, 1 Brass Bombard, and 1 Gizmek. Gizmek is weird because it's not necessarily like, it's not like these cards that are, right? Okay, it's not like Cobra. Cobra is like terrible in almost all situations. At best, it's a normal summon that will, is a different type, and so you can make Curious with it, but outside of that, it does absolutely nothing. Gizmek is a different type of engine requirement to where, like, if you, like you're gonna search this most of the time with your crescendo, and every turn after you have it, it's an extender. And so it's kind of weird to classify this, but it's definitely a card that I like having in this deck just because it's huge, not 2800 attack, but 2450 attack, big defense, and it's gonna put constant pressure on your opponents. Plus what your engine naturally does by itself, and so it's kind of rough to say this is an engine requirement. That's kind of giving it a disservice, but really good in this deck. Cobra obviously is necessary. Oh, also sometimes with this and Levianeer, you can hard make Dingirsu, which sounds terrible, but it has come up and it has won me games before, so that's a thing. Moving into the spell cards, there are not very many of them. Oh wait, before we finish the monsters, there were a couple of monsters that I didn't play that I did want to talk about actually. Psychic Wielder, which I used to play, Sea Archiver, and Hand Traps. These are other things I want to talk about. So, Psychic Wielder was a card that I was playing in previous iterations of this deck, and I've seen it in other builds online. The problem with Psychic Wielder is that, for this deck, it's an Earth monster. And that means you're not making Curious with it. And so in a lot of hands, this is essentially worse than a Burning Abyss monster because it doesn't work with your other Burning Abyss monsters, and you're not making Curious with it. And so there's like very little synergy with it outside of with maybe Fiendish, Rhino Warrior, or like the Danger monsters, which aren't super big portions of this deck. And so I felt that in most hands, I would have preferred to just have a Burning Abyss card. Like it would have been equal or worse than a Burning Abyss card to have a Psychic Wheeler. It was never better. And so that's why I ended up cutting them. Sea Archiver was another card that was very, very close to being in this deck because this was something that made the deck better. It raised the ceiling, especially when Rhino Warrior was more in the deck because I used to play 3 of them. But Sea Archiver is a card that makes this deck infinitely better if it is just simply in your deck. You don't even have to draw it. You could dump it with Cherubini and it makes it into an extra summon. That was very powerful, but the downside to me was that you are going to draw it. Like you're going to draw it some of the time. And when you do, it's an extra normal summon. And that is what we don't want in this deck because we already have the 3 Scorpios, we have the 3 Harps, plus we have potentially the Cobra, we have potentially the Brass, we have potentially the Cynbals, potentially multiple Burning Abyss monsters. So there are a lot of potential normal summons. And Scorpio helps with it to an extent, but that doesn't mean we want to play more cards that we're going to have to normal summon if we draw them. And then also, the deck is good enough without it. Yeah, it raises the ceiling, but the deck is good enough without it. So I wanted to mitigate that risk by cutting it, which is unfortunate because this is a very good card. Very, very good in this deck. And then finally, I do want to just give a brief mention about hand traps. This format, I just don't think that hand traps are that impactful. Like I don't think Ash stops any deck by itself. Like there isn't one point in any deck where Ash Blossom is just gonna like stop their turn. Like I saw somebody mention on Facebook that it band-aids the problem. And I think that's a correct analysis. Like it's just a band-aid. Like it maybe stops one thing, but they got a whole bunch of other things to do. Like it's not gonna stop Orcust really. It's not gonna stop Thunder. It's not gonna stop, any of the other decks really. So I just found them to be very lackluster. The only hand trap that really matters to me is Nibiru, but that doesn't really synergize super well with the deck, at least not in the main deck at least. So I felt that it was better to just play more extenders, more Burning Abyss monsters, play more of the cards that I want to see going first, and then optimize for that. So that is why I'm not playing any hand traps. Oh, and in that same regard, I don't even care if my opponent plays hand traps. Like one Ash isn't going to stop this deck, and that's a perfect example of why I'm not playing it. Like one Ash, one Impermanence, one anything is not going to stop this deck. And I don't expect my one copy of other hand traps to stop my opponents either. So, on to the spell cards. Once again, there's not very many. We'll do the spell and traps together, actually. Just because it's only these. 2 instant fusions, 1 Foolish Burial, 1 Crescendo. Instant fusion is really, really good. The only reason I don't play 3 is because it's not very good in multiples, and you do already play Scorpio. So that's essentially 5 copies of it. So you're going to see multiples, but you don't want to see multiples. So I didn't want to. The third one was just a break a lot of the time. Foolish Burial is definitely one of the best spells in the deck. It's why it's the only other spell I play in the game, or in this deck, out of all the spells in the game. It's because it can be your Graff, it can be your Libic, it can be your Harp being sent to the graveyard, it can be anything. And it's an extremely powerful effect, and so I find it to be something I always want to draw. Well, not always, but almost always. And then finally the Crescendo, which is obvious. Oh, notable is that I did cut the field spell. I cut the field spell just because it has negative synergy with the Burning Abyss engine, and we did increase the Burning Abyss monsters. And then also it doesn't really have a huge impact in my opinion, so why? Similar to Sea Archiver. Like it's good to have, but it's not often worth it. Moving into the extra deck, for the Burning Abyss cards, we have Cherubini, Dante, and Beatrice. Finally got a secret Dante, but it is not first edition, but that's aside from the point. These are the ones that you're going to go into every single game for the most part, especially Cherubini. This card makes the deck work. This card is absolutely insane. For the Orcust engine, we have, let's see, 2 Galatea, 1 Longirsu, 1 Dingirsu. Pretty self-explanatory. Next we have the cards that make the deck work outside of Cherubini. We have Curious and Appaloosa. These cards are both absolutely insane. I mean, Appaloosa is what's going to protect you from your hand traps most of the time. It gives you multiple negates. Very hard for opponents to play around, especially in combination with the Dingirsu, so it can't be destroyed by battle or any other thing. And then Curious is how you're getting your, not your danger, but your Orcust cards in the graveyard if you aren't able to just like draw into them. Both of these are very important. Let's move these out the way to make some space. Next we have the other extra deck cards. We have Barricade Blocker, Nightmares, Phoenix, and Unicorn, Boar Sword, and then for the fusions we have Winda and Thousand Eyes Restrict. These three are all pretty self-explanatory. Nightmare is self-explanatory. The only thing that you're maybe not expecting is the Barricade Blocker, but Barricade Blocker has by itself won me a lot of games and fixed a lot of hands. For one, it's a dark machine monster. You don't have any other machines outside of the Orcust cards, and so it's going to help you go into your Curious a lot more often. Like when you open a handful of Burning Abyss cards and you want to go into a Curious, this is what you're making because you're like linking 2 Burning Abyss into this. It gives you a different type. That's how you do it with a handful of Burning Abyss cards. Also, if you draw into your Orcust cards and you aren't able to discard them, this is a way to do that for free. So you have a Harp Horror, but you also have a Tour Guide. You normal summon your Tour Guide, and somewhere throughout the combo you make a Barricade Blocker, discard the Harp, and now you don't have to waste resources making that Curious. You can focus on making the Appaloosa or making the Beatrice, but still have access to your Orcust engine. So Barricade Blocker fixes a lot of problems in this deck. Like again, it helps the normal summons, gets cards from the hand to the graveyard, and it's a dark and machine. So that's very good. However, when Chaos Impact comes out, I'm thinking about switching this for an IP Mask Arena. Just because IP Mask Arena is just such a good card, and it's also a Cyburst type, so it's a different type, so it works with Curious, and it's gonna help you just have extra layers of defense if you aren't able to do your normal plays. And I think that's really valuable, but it's interesting because they both serve different roles. They both are very good, so I'm not sure what I'll cut for that. I definitely want to play it, but I'm not sure what to cut. Maybe Galatea. No, the second one comes up too. I don't know. What would you cut for the IP Mask Arena? You definitely want to play it, but not sure what to cut. Interesting. Let's get these out of the way. Oh, one other card I want to mention is Topologic Trisbania. This is another card I was really interested in playing because there's actually a combo to where you can end on, let's see, where'd the Beatrice go? There's a combo where you can end on Beatrice in one extra monster zone and Trisbania in front of the other extra monster zone. And so this gives you 1 disruption from the Beatrice, and then any monster that your opponent summons in their extra monster zone will get banished by Trisbania's effect. So it's kind of like a soft lock that's really hard for a lot of decks to play around. Like you make this against Salad, they auto lose. Like Salad cannot play around this because they make their Baylings banished. Okay, now what? They make Mirage Thalio, 1 summon, banished. That means they're not getting the effect. Sunlight Wolf, like banished. Like what what do they do against this? There's no out. The only out is maybe if you can make like a Cerberus or something, but if they're starting their play with a Cerberus, they're not doing their main plays, so you kind of win in that regard. And they have Beatrice to play around too, so this is an auto win against a lot of decks. Orcust can't deal with this either. Thunder Dragons, they can kind of deal with this just because they're kind of big and whatnot, but this is really tough for a lot of decks to get around. So I was heavily considering playing Trisbania, but again, the space is so tight that I just wasn't sure like what to take out, where to put it in. And I think in a pure Burning Abyss deck, this would be amazing. But in this deck, it just doesn't really work as... I mean, it works. It still works, but it's just space. Okay, moving on to the side deck. We have 3 Eradicators, 3 Lancias, 3 Nibiru, 3 evenly, 3 twins. Very simple. All 3 ups. I mean, the format is still very undefined, but I think this lineup is actually really good for me, for this deck even. Because if you're playing against most combo decks, then I think in most matchups, honestly, you have 6 cards that you can side in. So if you're going, I think if you go first in a lot of cases, I don't really side too heavily at all, because this deck going first beats pretty much every other monster-based deck. If you're playing against a spell or trap-based deck, it's a little different because Appaloosa doesn't do anything, Beatrice doesn't do as much, and that's where I think the Eradicator comes in. So pretty much if I go first against like Altergeist, True Draco, or something like that, Eradicator is going in. Maybe the Twin Twisters, but definitely the Eradicators. Because again, like, if I summon Appaloosa Beatrice against True Draco, they will laugh in my face. Like, Appaloosa does nothing, and then they will just destroy my Beatrice and I have nothing to summon off of it. And I think that's a fair assumption for opponents to make too, is that we don't play the Dante Pilgrim, so they'll just destroy it with like a trap and then I lose. Same with Altergeist. Like, what do I do against Altergeist when Appaloosa means nothing and they set a bunch of strikes? Like, I'll lose that game. So Eradicator is really good in those matchups. If you're going second in those matchups, Twin Twister and Evenly Matched are very good. These are blowouts in a lot of cases, especially when you're discarding like an Orcust or a Danger or Burning Abyss. Like, you discard a Calcab and you're getting rid of 3 back row. Or it could be a Fiendish Rhino Warrior or a Graff. That's multiple ways to get to that Calcab to deal with the 3rd back row. So Twin Twisters is really good in that regard. Evenly obvious. If you're going second against like Orcust, these 6 cards are very good. If you're going second against Salad, then I think Nibiru and Evenly are very good. So I think in most matchups going second, I have 6 cards. Going first against monster-based decks, I don't side anything because I'll just win. And then going second against spell trap-based decks, especially trap-based decks, Eradicator is going to be very strong. So that's the side deck. Very simple, short and sweet, gets the job done. But yeah, that's the deck. If you guys have any comments, suggestions, or concerns, let me know in the comment section below. If there's anything that you would change, again, let me know. Oh wait, yeah. Another card I want to mention, which I should have mentioned before, is Called by the Grave. I am not playing Called by the Grave in this deck, once again, because I don't think hand traps are very impactful. So yes, I'm not worried about like the hand traps that I'm worried about are like Impermanence. I'm worried about, Phantasmi's fine. I'm worried about Nibiru, obviously, but Called by the Grave doesn't stop those. So it doesn't stop Super Poly either. That's another card to worry about. Like, the cards that you are worried about, Called by the Grave doesn't do anything against. And so that's why I'm not playing it. Trying to think if there was anything else I want to say. But I think that's it. So yeah, guys, thank you for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I think this is probably one of the best Burning Abyss lists that I've made in a while. So try it out for yourselves. I'm sure you guys are going to pilot it to a lot of success. It's going to win you some games. So have fun with it, guys. See you later.